So JavaScript is one of the core learning outcomes of this course. It's one of the things that you will really learn and use in this course. So today I'll be introducing it. Some of the things that are very similar to the language you already know, like C++ and Java, I will skim through it very quickly, and I will focus more on what is specific to JavaScript. So these are the things we will be covering, what JavaScript is, and the typical programming skills or programming aspects that you need to cover in any language. What are the data types, the operators, the if-then statements, the loops, arrays, and functions? Those are the key aspects of any language. So first, what is JavaScript and what we use it for? So this is very important to understand before we see how to do it. As I always advised, always try to ask what I can use this for before you learn how to do so. So what JavaScript is, it is a language that can be used in both the client side and the server side. Remember, in this course, we are learning the two sides of web development, the client side, the server side. In the beginning, JavaScript was invented as a simple language to do some simple manipulations of HTML elements on the client side. And then, as time goes, people saw value in it in terms of simplicity, in terms of being a dynamic language. And basically, they took it out of the browser and made JavaScript run on any platform. It can run on a PC, on a server, on a mobile phone. So it can be used in the context of our course. It can be used on the client side, and it can be used also on the server side. So on the server side, on the client side, JavaScript runtime is already embedded in all browsers that we use every day. On the server side, you need this engine, a runtime engine called Node.js. So Node.js is an open source project that took the JavaScript engine that comes with Chrome. It's called V8. And on top of it, they added some extra libraries to make JavaScript run outside the browser. That's what Node.js is. So to be able to run the examples we will see in this course or in this session, you need to download and install Node.js. So, as I said, JavaScript can be used both on the client side and on the server side. It is very light and powerful. It is an interpreted language. What does this mean? What does it mean it is by an interpreted language?
You can merge to another language?
No, not really. Like, for example, when you write a C++ program, before you run it, what did you do? You compile it, yes? So first you translate it from high-level language to machine language, and then you run it. And that compilation step, is it optional or is it a must?
Must.
It is a must. So that's one family of languages. You need to first compile them to a machine code, and then you run the result of the executable that gets generated. So that's the family of compiled languages. Interpreted language, there is no compilation step. So when I write JavaScript program, it just runs from the source. So for example, in the context of the browser, the JavaScript will be downloaded from the server to the browser. The browser has a runtime engine, and it will go through line by line and execute the JavaScript code. There is no compilation step. Yes? Another family that is between the compiled languages and the interpreted languages, there is something in between. We call it a hybrid language, such as Java. So when you write a Java program, what do you do before you run it? You compile it. But does it produce a machine code?
No.
What does it produce?
The Java doesn't actually run on the machine itself. It runs on a virtual machine.
Very good. Yes. So basically, when you compile it, it creates an intermediary language called bytecode, and that intermediary results will need a virtual machine for it to run, and that's what makes Java portable to different platforms like Windows, Unix, and all. Yes. So basically, the idea here, JavaScript is an interpreted language. There is no compilation step. Okay, so as I explained, it can run inside the browser or it can run outside using Node.js. It supports both functional programming and object-oriented programming. You're already familiar with object-oriented. Functional programming is you decompose your applications into functions. We will see some of the properties of functional languages as we move forward. It is truly platform independent. It runs everywhere, in any platform. Unix, Windows, mobile phones, browsers. It runs really, truly everywhere. Now, the latest version, every year there is a new version of JavaScript because it's one of the most popular languages, and the people behind it, it's called ECMAScript committee. Every year there is some incremental change, some extra features added. So the latest version is ECMAScript 2018. Okay, this is very important. As I said, before diving into the how, you need to understand what you can use it for. So on the server side, in the context of this course, we will use JavaScript to build the server-side components of a web application. So you can do whatever, your imagination is the limit. You can do computations, reading and writing to files, reading and writing to database, talking to other systems. There is no limit. On the client side, this is what you can typically do with JavaScript on the browser. Sometimes you want to handle events that happen on the browser. So the clients click a button, for example, and you want to react to this click. Let me give you another example. Many times we have, let's say, two drop downs, one for city, one for country, one for cities, as an example. So when you select the country, then the browser in the background will go and get the cities of the selected country, and it will fill up the cities list. So this is an example of behave, or an example of a dynamic functionality that you can do on the browser using JavaScript. So typically, you're either handling client-side events, or you are manipulating the DOM. Remember the DOM we discussed last time, the tree that gets generated by the browser to represent the HTML document. So what you can do, you can go through the DOM, grab some elements from the DOM, remove it, or you can change its font, you can hide it, you can show it. So you can basically manipulate the DOM. That's one of the functions of JavaScript. Of course, we will see how to do everything, every element in this list. But you first need to be familiar what are the capabilities of JavaScript before we dive into the how. Okay, you can also do validation of inputs. So for example, you ask somebody, let's say, enter date of birth. You can validate. The date of birth should not be a future date. It should be something less or equal to today, as an example. You can also perform simple computations. Simple computations on the client side without going all the way to the server side. You can do asynchronous server calls. We will see in more details what this means, but I already gave you a small example of two drop-downs. One is the country, one is the cities, and whenever the country change, you go ahead and change the cities without refreshing the whole page. In the background, you do this fetching or getting the data from the server side and changing the content of the cities drop-down. We call this a scenario, we call it asynchronous server call. All right, there are other usages, of course. JavaScript is also used in, some of you maybe took game design, some of the game engines, they use JavaScript as the language to manipulate the objects in the game. It has many use cases and usage scenarios, but as far as our course is concerned, these are the main scenarios that we will learn how to do. Okay, next. Now, from the outside, as we start covering how JavaScript program looks like, from the outside, it looks very, very similar to C family of languages, such as Java and C#. But from the inside, like the design of the language and the inner working of the language is very different. So initially, it will look the same. As we dive deeper, it is different. So as we will see, most of this stuff you already know. I will only be stopping, as I said, into aspects that are different to what you already know in a programming language such as Java and C++. Okay, so before I go any further, let me just very quickly introduce this Node.js. As I mentioned, it is an open source project that enables us to run JavaScript outside the browser. You can go here and download the latest version. It is very popular and widely used. Even big companies are using it. You can look up case studies of how these companies are using it. So it's not a little toy that only like novice or some kind of small use cases or some small usage. It is used by large companies as well. So, and the popularity of Node.js has created the new web platform. So set of technologies that are typically used together. And in this course, we will see them. So these technologies, when we use them together, they form what is known as the mean stack. Mean stands for Mongo, Express, Angular, and Node. So this is the modern stack that web developers are using to build web application. In the past, we used to have, let's say, MySQL, PHP. Those are kind of getting out of fashion, and this is the more fashionable stack that developers are using. So for managing the database or managing data, even in this course, we'll be using MongoDB. For developing the server side of the application, we will use Node.js. Node.js is the runtime engine, and on top of it, there are so many thousands of libraries that you can build, that you can download and use with Node.js. The most important libraries that we will be seeing in this course will be Express and Mongoose. Mongoose allows us to easily interact with MongoDB, and Express allows us to create web API and to allow us to talk to the server side. We will see what this means as we move forward. And on the client side, we will be using Angular as a library for creating the user interface. So if you use these technologies together, you are basically using the mean stack. And the good thing about it, you only need to use one language, which is JavaScript in all the levels. JavaScript is used in all the levels. And the JSON is the data format. Data flowing from every layer is in JSON format. I will explain what this JSON means as we move forward. Yes, please.
Can you elaborate more on Express?
Okay, we will see this in much more details. But basically, Express allows us to have a function running on the server side. And I can call that function remotely from the browser, for example, or from a mobile device. So it's through HTTP. So it allows that it allows us to have a client server development environment. So Express makes it very easy to do, as we will see. So we'll have a whole session on Express, whole session on Mongoose as we move forward. But these are the modern stack, the modern combination of technologies that modern web developers are using to build applications. And that's what we will be doing also in this course. Okay, so hopefully now you get the idea what JavaScript is all about, what we can use it for. And by the way, the skills you learn here are very valuable because you can use them in many scenarios. You can use the same language and the same skills for interacting and developing your database, for developing the server side, and for developing the client side. And also, you can use it for developing mobile applications based on JavaScript. So it is a core fundamental. Learning JavaScript and building your skills in JavaScript programming is a core skill that will really enable you to become a professional web developer. So that's why from now on, JavaScript, regularly will be using it throughout the course. Okay, so let's start. Like any other programming language, when you start learning a language, the first thing is you ask yourself, how do I declare variables? What are the data types in the language? That's the first question you typically asked. So if you rewind and look at, let's say, CMPS 151, the programming concepts 252, that's the first topic you cover when you learn a programming language. Okay, so here is how I declare a variable. So I use the keyword let, followed by an identifier. This is the variable name. And I can, if I wish, I can initialize it. This is optional. So here is an example. In here, I'll say let, this is a keyword, JavaScript keyword. And this is the name of the variable. I initialize it to 200. And I put semicolon to finish the statement. This is optional, but most people will put semicolon at the end of the line. Okay, so what is the difference between this declaration and the declaration you already know from Java and C++? What is the difference? Very good. Yes, in here, we don't explicitly say what is the data type of this variable. So this is one major difference in JavaScript. It is what we call a loosely typed language. It doesn't mean that there is no type. What will be the data type of height? It is a number. Okay. So there is a type, but is it explicit or implicit? It is implicit. How does the runtime system knows the type of this variable?
Detects the value.
From the value. From the value you assign, not only in initialization, you can change, whenever you change the value, the data type will be based on the value. Okay, so what I mean by this, let me just quickly go there and just take this one. Let me open my Chrome. Okay, I can go here, inspect, go to console. Okay, and then I'll say, type this. So here I define the variable height, and I can query it. The variable height is 200. I can also say type of the variable height is a number. So there is a type. Can you see it? There is a type, but is it explicit? No, it is implicit based on the value that I assign. Suppose, just imagine, like I put here the height, for example, 20. Just imagine this. So I'm changing the value and also assigning a string, for example, instead of assigning a number. So in here, what will be the type? So the height will be 20. What will be the type of this variable? It became a string. So there is a type, but the type is implicit based on the value we assign to the variable. Okay. Yes, please.
Those commands you wrote are called queries.
Which one?
Type of.
No, this is a function. Type of is a function. We will see it as we move forward. But the main thing to keep in mind for now, to declare a variable, I use the keyword let, followed by the variable name, and I can optionally initialize it. I don't need to explicitly state the data type. The data type is implicitly determined based on the value. And that's why JavaScript, we call it a loosely typed language or a dynamic language. The type is not static. Now, so for example here, this is a loop. Okay, just a small example here. Let me run it. I can copy, by the way, take it to the browser. Can I do this? Clear? No. Okay, I'll run it here. So this is a loop. This is an array. We will see this in more details. This is an array, 1, 2, 3, 4. I am looping through every element of this array and displaying the number. It will. So if I run it, it will display 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes? Now, if I try to access this number here, number is not defined, although it was defined inside the loop. So what is the scope? You remember the variable scope? So what is the scope of this variable number? Just inside the loop. Outside, it's not visible. Yes, if you want to use it outside, you use not recommended at all, but I'm only telling you this because you might find in all JavaScript scripts, you might find people using var. Please don't use var. Because don't use var. Basically, var, no, ES6 and above. ES6. So var, it is still there, of course. But the problem is the loop has finished and the number is still there. The variable number is still there.
Yeah, but if I put var, I'm making it up again, like another variable?
No. For now, basically don't use var. For now, don't use var at all. Use let. Okay? If you need to keep some, we will see. So don't use var, please use let. That's basically the idea. And the idea is let respect the scope. If you declare it within a function, that variable is only visible within the function. If you declare the variable inside the loop, that variable is only visible within the loop. And this is very important to avoid bugs. And also, once the variable is no longer needed, why should we keep it in memory? Because remember, variables occupy memory space. So because I am inside the loop, I finished with it, I don't need to keep it. So that's why we should use let instead of var. And let is a new keyword that was introduced in version ES 2015, which is ES6. It's called ES6. But it doesn't matter. Let's not dive into this. We are learning the latest and as much as possible the best ways of doing things. And since most of us will be starting kind of from scratch, we better learn the best possible ways and the latest ways. Okay, so var is still there, but please don't use it. If you want to declare a constant is something that does not, once you declare it and initialize it, you cannot change it. If you change it, the runtime will throw an error. So if I declare something like this, I can use it. This is max value. I can use it. But if I try to change it, I will get a runtime error. Assignment to constant variable, not allowed. So that's what the constant is for. Okay, so as I already explained, the data type, JavaScript is a loosely typed or a dynamic language. Loosely typed means I don't explicitly state what is the type, but the runtime will work out the type based on based on the value that I assign to the variable. So what is the data type of count? Number. Data type of name? String. And data type of grade? Number. Okay, so these are the data types. So JavaScript, how many data types JavaScript has? 5 data types. 5 data types. We have number. We don't have string, float, double, number. Anything made up of digits is a number. We have string that you're all familiar with. Boolean is true, false. We have undefined. Okay, undefined is a data type. So what is undefined? So let me show you. So if I declare a variable, and I don't assign anything to it, I don't initialize it, what will be the value of x? Undefined. What is the data type of x? Undefined. So here, small little confusion that you need to this is how JavaScript people designed it. So so if you declare a variable and you don't assign any value to it, what will be the value of that variable? Undefined. The value will be undefined and the data type will be undefined, which makes sense because the system is not able to work out the type because there is no value. So the value is undefined and also the type is undefined. Because for the runtime to know the type, you should first initialize the variable. Because I didn't initialize it, it is undefined. Yes, please. You want to say something? Yes, let's say. So if I say x equal 10, yes, and then I query x, it's 10. So if I do now type of x, number. That's why JavaScript is called a dynamic language. Dynamic language means the type of the variable type could change, which is not possible in strongly typed languages, such as Java. If you declare something as integer, it will remain integer until the end of the program. In JavaScript, a variable could change its type. And this is an example. We started with undefined variable. We assigned to it a number. The data type became a number. So the language, to summarize, JavaScript is both data types. JavaScript is both a loosely typed language. What does loosely typed means?
Doesn't really need type.
Yeah, you don't need to specify the type when you declare variables, but the type is there. The runtime will work it out from the value you assign. And dynamic language, what does dynamic language means? Like the variable type could change at a runtime. That is the idea. So the other type is a function. A function is a data type in JavaScript. A function is data type. So although we will cover functions as we move forward, but let me just give you a small example. So if I declare here, let square equal function, okay, so what I did here is a bit strange syntax. Don't worry, you will get familiar with this as we move forward. Here I declared the variable square, and here I took this function. You are familiar with functions.
Yes.
Function, it takes some variable, it does some computation and returns some value. So in here, what this function is doing, it takes x.
Multiplied by x.
Yes, it squares it and returns the square. And what I'm doing to this function, I'm assigning it to this variable. Now, I can, of course, call this function by doing square 3. What it will give me? 9. Now, if I say type of square, what do you think?
Function.
Yes. Function. So, a function is a data type. So, these are the little things that are different from other languages. In JavaScript, you can take a function and assign it to a variable. This is exactly what I did here. You see here what's going on? I created the function. What I did to this function, I assigned it to this variable. And then I can use this variable to call the function. What is the data type of this variable? It is a function. So a function is a data type in JavaScript. So how many data types we have in JavaScript? 5. Number, string, boolean, undefined, and function. Yes, please.
Can you go back?
Yes.
In the previous examples, you only wrote the equal 10 or equal string, and it changed the type of to a string or number.
Yes.
But here, you declared it's a function.
Yes.
You already declared it's a function. Is that not necessary? A function x?
Because these are values. So you remember, a variable typically what we have in our understanding from Java, what is a variable? It's a container where I can put data inside. Yes? Now, in JavaScript, it takes it one step further. A variable could hold a function inside it. So in here, I am storing a function. What is a function? It's some piece of code that I can call later, give it some input, it's produced for me some output. So in here, this is just a value. Somebody, what is like Ali's age, we say 10. We take 10 and store it in a variable. In here, it's much, much more. I'm defining a function, storing it in the variable, and then what can I do with that variable? Call it and give it some input. This is what I did. I called this variable, I give it an input, and gave me the output. But x is not able to do this. All I can do with x is get the value.
It doesn't have a function inside.
No, it doesn't have. If I try to do this, JavaScript will be laughing at me, and it will say, "What are you trying to do? This is not a function. This is a value." Yes, please.
Is it going to still work if you remove the function x after the equal? If you remove this line, function x, will it still work?
But it will not make sense if I don't define it as a function. I can define it as a string if I wish. This is a string. It's fine. But if I wanted to, function is like storing some computation, some way of doing computation in the variable. So in here, yes, I can store it like string if I wish, but that will be a string. But if I want it to be a function, I have to start with the keyword function, define the parameters, and then in the body of the function, I define what the function is supposed to do. Okay? Last thing I want to say is in JavaScript, in string, you can either have a string with double quotes or single quotes. It's the same. It's up to you which one you want to do. But this is very, very useful. As we will see later, you can combine them. But don't worry, just for now, this is what you keep in mind. Is single quote or double quote, both of them are considered as strings. Okay, strings also have methods. This is very similar to what you have seen in Java. If you come and say string.length, I think it's easier to just do it here. So if I say here, let name, if I say name dot length, give me 3. Okay, if I say name dot 0, will give me a, because the string is kind of an array. Yes, it's with the index 0, and the last character will be the length -1. I can also concatenate this with another string. Let's say something like this. And then the name becomes, no, sorry, this will produce another name. So I can concatenate two strings using concat, or I can just concatenate it using the plus sign. Yep. So there are some functions associated with strings that you might want to use.
What happened with the concatenate?
Sorry?
What happened with
Same. Concatenate or plus.
No.
What do you mean what happened?
It didn't change the name.
No, you have to assign to change.
So it's different.
No, it's not different. Concatenate, it doesn't mean it changed. If you want to change, you have to do this. Now name will become this. Same for concatenate. Concatenate, it doesn't mean it will change the name. It will produce another string. If you want to change the name, you have to assign the produced produced value after you concatenate. So concatenate does not mean it will change the original variable. If you want to change the original variable, you have to assign it. So if I do something like this, then the name will be changed. Okay. If I want to convert from a number to a string or string to a number, many ways of doing it. Simple ways is that if num is a number, I can convert it to a string using toString, similar to Java. If I have a string, I want to convert it to a number, I'll do parse int and pass to it the string. Or I can, this is alternative ways, but the ones that I highlight are the most commonly used ones. By the way, I told you many times, in this course we are covering the 20%. So I will be showing you, to my understanding and to my experience, the most common and kind of the best way of doing it. Then you can discover other ways. Otherwise, I will be like kind of spending too much time with little added value. Yeah, you get the idea. So for doing the casting or data conversion, these are the most commonly used ones that I should emphasize on. Okay, string template. This is very nice feature in JavaScript. By the way, what this line is doing, anybody can tell me? What this line?
First name. So I'm just making an object.
Very good. So in here, I'm creating an object on the fly. You know, in Java, for example, before you create an object, what should you do? In Java?
First, you have to
create a class first, and then you instantiate an object out of the class. In JavaScript, you can create an object on the fly without having a class first. So in here, what I'm doing, I'm creating a person object, and it has two properties, first name, last name, and I'm assigning some values. And by the way, this notation, what do I call this notation here that you see here?
This is what you keep the object variables inside.
Yes, what do we call this notation? Yes, I know that. No, this is JSON format. This is what JSON means. JSON, JavaScript object notation. JSON, JavaScript object notation. This is widely used in web applications and mobile applications. This is how I represent data. I represent data and objects using JSON format. Now, what this second line is doing, I build a nice string, and this one is static, this is hard-coded, but this one is coming from this variable, and this one is coming from this object. Yes, this is a much neater way, much nicer way of building a string based on a template. You consider this as a template. You know what's a template? Yes? In plain English, what is a template? Skeleton of some document. So if you want to create, let's say, a letter, let's say a secretary wants to write a letter, she doesn't need to start from scratch. She brings a template and fill up just some pieces in the template. Dear Mr. and she fill up the name. Yes, this is a template, and these values will be coming from the object. Let me just run this, and then I will take questions. So first, let me take this one and just run it just to show you what's going on. So I will do here. Okay, so I run this. So this line, what this line is doing, it will create an object, person. Okay, and this person now if I do dot, I'll get the properties of this person. This is the first name. And this, if I do person.l, even the Chrome runtime or Chrome, this console, it recognizes that this is an object and it has two properties. It gives me this completion and IntelliSense. As soon as I do dot, it gives me the properties of this object. So it is an object. Okay, now if I want to concatenate those into a nice thing, I can always do something like this. Full name plus space plus person.
You already added the space.
Ah, yes, you're right. But I need it later.
The first name.
Sorry. Plus this thing, space, plus person. Sorry, person dot last name. Yes, and it will give me this. That's one way of doing it. A better way of doing it is to use the string template, where console.log is basically if I want to write something to this console that I'm writing in. So if I go back, paste this here, and it will give me exactly the same, but it's a much more elegant way of doing it. So this is inverted quote, and inside it I put the dollar curly brace, and then the name of the variable. Dollar curly braces, and the name of the variable. This will allow me to access values from objects. It's not limited to objects. If you remember, I had, I think, X somewhere. Let's say age will be dollar. I think X, I declared this before. Age 10. So I can access any variable that I have declared earlier from this template. Yes, please.
What about the spaces between them? You don't make spaces in the console log.
I make spaces here. Because this is a string. These are the spaces. Already I have them. I don't need to concatenate them. I'm just writing a string. And this string will have some placeholders will be replaced, which will be replaced at a runtime by values from variables. That's basically what a string literal means. This is called template literal, or basically a string template in JavaScript. There is another little confusing in JavaScript is the difference between undefined and null. Undefined and null. So in JavaScript, in Java, you are familiar with a null. What is a null in JavaScript?
Null is nothing.
Sorry?
Null is nothing.
Null basically usually means unavailable. The value is not known yet. Okay? So what is the difference between undefined and null in JavaScript?
Defined is when you declare. If you declare something, you define it. But null, if you don't initialize, it becomes null.
No, that is the trick. You see here,
Undefined
it's the opposite what you said.
It's actually its own data. Undefined is its own type.
Not only, yes, undefined is also a type, yes. But basically, because I already declared this, so let me do y. So y, the variable y, what will be the value of y?
Undefined.
Undefined. Why is it undefined?
Because we haven't defined it.
I didn't initialize it. I did declare it, but I did not initialize it. Yes, I did not initialize it. So the value is undefined, and the type is?
Type of undefined.
Is also undefined. This is by design. You just need to keep it in mind. It's not like some magic. This is how the JavaScript people designed it. If you declare a variable and you don't put anything inside it, you don't assign anything, what will be the value? Undefined. What will be the type? Undefined. Null is something you can choose to explicitly assign to a variable. Let's say declare A and I put null in there. Null is a value. Yes? Null is just a value. What will be the value of A?
No.
Null. What will be the data type of A?
Undefined would be.
No.
No,
It is defined. I declared A and I assigned null to it.
I think it's no.
String.
No.
No, object.
Object. Very good.
Right.
Yes. So data type here is object. So I think we have one mistake here. Yes, one mistake here. What did we say? The data types, 5 data types? That's a bit of a lie. It's 6 data types.
We've already defined everything else. There's no object here.
Ah, yes. Okay. All right. Good. But I think it would be nice to add it here as well. Yes, object is a data type. So that's the difference. So undefined is when you declare a variable and you don't assign anything to it. Null is a value. You can assign it to any variable. And what's the data type of that variable you give it a null? Will be object.